We're just waiting for, David will join us as soon as he can. So welcome to this Risk and Assurance Committee meeting of the 3rd of October. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. I'll just say the opening prayer. Karakia, tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I waho, tūtaua mai I roto. Ki te au, te Māori tū, te Māori ora ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, te au ki e. Kia ora, thank you. Welcome, David. Any apologies for the meeting? We've got 2 apologies. Councillor and leave of absence. Councillor Jenny Duncan and Councillor Rob Vinson. Can I have a mover and a second? Don't need to move or second it. That's fine. We accept the apologies for the leave of absence. Moving right along, we'll go to the declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? No, thank you. And now we'll move to the confirmation of minutes of the meeting on the 1st of August. Thank you, Bridget and the Democracy team for the minutes. Any comments or questions about the minutes? No? Then can I have a mover and a seconder? Kate and Peter, thank you. All those in favour? Carried, thank you. All right, quick start to the meeting. So that's good. The first item on our agenda is the paper on insurance, recommend changes to the Council's insurance coverage under its material damages policy. Now this is a follow-up to the paper a couple of meetings ago and the preparation that we did at the last meeting around asset management and asset criticality, and looking at how we would make changes to the insurance going forward. I want to firstly acknowledge thanks to Mike and the team, because this has been a very big job in working through this particular item. And just to sort of clarify, the terms of reference for this committee is about reviewing the annual insurance. So this is part of our responsibility, and we've taken a strategic approach, which Mike's talked to us about over a few meetings now, to how we're looking at insurance and where we might make different decisions based on the criticality of some of the assets we do insure. This is another way that this committee adds value to the wider work of the Council and the scrutiny that we're putting onto this particular item. So, Mike, I'm going to pass over to you. I know you've got a presentation to take us through, particularly around some of the risks and issues related to this paper. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. These slides are in your team's Intelligent folder. The item is quite a large item, so I thought it'd be useful to pick out some of the main points of the item. Up there is the chart that's in the report. It lists down the different types of assets that are covered by a material damages policy. The insured value. I've got estimated insurance premiums. All that's happened there is we've prorated the premiums according to the value of the assets. In reality, it's not quite that simple for premiums. So, for example, if we take off all of our council property assets off our schedule, I've got their premiums of $1.5 million. We won't save $1.5 million. So the reports, the recommendation from officers in the report is that this committee recommends to Council it removes from its material damage policy those assets identified on the attached criticality ranking for the material damage policy schedule. That's one part, and the second part is to increase the deductible for the non-natural disaster events covered by the material damage policy to $1 million. So how have we arrived at these recommendations? What's caused us to put these recommendations up? I guess two main points. The first one is obviously premium renewals for the 23-24 was a significant increase. I think in the report talks about over 50% increase to the previous year. And that started the conversation around changing our approach to risk transfer. Insurance, purchasing insurance is all about risk transfer. We pay a company some money to take the risk of our assets onto their balance sheets should something happen to those assets for a defined event. I would state that the current approach that we have taken to purchasing insurance, it's now become misaligned to our insurance strategy and also the financial prudence requirement in the Local Government Act. Our strategy talks about having sufficient resources available to recover from a catastrophic event, while also doing the risk transfer at a basically affordable manner to the community, which is similar to the prudent stuff in the Local Government Act, which talks about making prudent decisions in the way we basically spend our money. And arguably, insuring assets that is below a deductible and we possibly will not replace in a wide event is not necessarily prudent. So the factors that we've considered or which has been instrumental in us making these recommendations. Council's capacity to recover from a major event, such as a major earthquake, and I won't repeat that. It does talk about it in the paper, and it was a large focus of the workshop we had a few weeks ago, talking about in a major event, what are the likely losses, particularly to key infrastructure? What's the order of recovery from an event, and what available resources do we have to do that? And briefly, you're looking initially at your critical infrastructure. We've got insurance for those. We've got lines within a long-term plan we can redirect towards that. So we're talking about a considerable period of time before we start focusing on the assets we're talking about today. So that's a widespread event, but also a single asset. If we have a fire in one of an asset that we want to replace, what is our capacity to be able to recover from that? I think importantly, what I've said to the Chair Susan, a few times now is that I'm pleased in the process that we have gone through to arrive at that decision. I'd love to be at this place a lot earlier and be able to making more recommendations, but I didn't want to bring ad hoc recommendations based on a feeling that, well, maybe we may need that, maybe we wouldn't. I wanted some reasonable methodology behind the recommendations that we're making. And to me, one of the key components of that is the framework that has been established, looking at the asset criticality for above ground property, open spaces assets. That's critical to the recommendations today. And the risk and impact of the recommendations being made by officers, including the impact of the community and the ratepayers. In the workshop, I likened it to the decision we made two committee meetings ago in May to take off some pretty low value, low risk assets. Was the real low hanging fruit, just about touching the ground. We took those off. We're kind of climbing up the tree a bit more now, and we're kind of getting onto our tiptoes to the middle part of the tree. We actually probably need to go a little bit higher up the tree, but that's for another discussion at another day. I got the statement here. I like the statement. It's from me. But it's so true. If you want to reduce premiums, then you actually need to start reducing premiums. You actually have to start making decisions to reduce premiums and not skirting around the edges if you want to make some meaningful impact on premiums. And a meaningful reduction does involve accepting more risk. Importantly, and I only say this in this slide, and important for everybody to understand, including the public, we are not talking about reducing levels of service. If we're taking an asset from the insurance schedule, all it means is we're taking that asset on, the risk of damage to that asset, the risk onto our own balance sheet. We're still maintaining the assets, we're still delivering the level of service. If the asset is destroyed, then it's another conversation at that point in time, whether we want to replace it, repair, whatever. So how can we materially reduce premiums? In my mind, there's 3 ways to do it, to really cut into premiums. The number one thing is simply to insure less assets. Take assets off your insurance schedule. Of course, results in risk to council, increasing the levels of deductibles. Both those recommendations are today. And then improving asset data and information provided to insurers, resulting in them pricing less risk into their premiums, which was a part of the an item to the previous, to the last committee meeting where Rosemary and her team talked about the work they're doing within that space of improving asset data. I won't focus on this. We've seen this at a committee meeting, last committee meeting, the May committee meeting plus the workshop, talking about where, in a normal situation, what capacity do we have to take increasing debt before we reach our debt limits as imposed by the local government funding agency. This next slide, again, I won't focus on too much. This was part of the workshop, and I put to those at the workshop, where is your debt appetite? Given that we have, on a conservative basis, round about $220 million extra dollars we could draw down in debt to what is currently in a long-term plan. In an event, a significant event, what's your comfort levels? And it was only an indication. There's no holding people to that right at this point in time. It's just an indication. At that point, it was round about $140 million, which was impact to the ratepayer on average just under $470. There are assumptions in that, and there is an attachment talking about assumptions around that. Interesting exercise, will become probably more relevant if we want to cut deeper into the premiums and take more risk on the balance sheet. But for the purposes of the recommendations of this report, it's useful at this stage, but it's not necessarily critical. Based on the criticality framework, you have seen this at the last committee meeting. The framework was presented and how we ranked above ground assets. Appreciate this is completely different ranking criteria to roading and three water assets, which can be life critical assets. These are assets which are above grounds. Some of them are nice to haves. Some really add to community cohesion, but some of them are nice to haves. So based on that ranking, high level table of how many assets are in each of the high, medium, low, very low, the value, and again estimated premium based on prorating it, again very high level. The recommendation is to take the assets really from your medium ranking of 70 to 74, there's none in that category, there below, to take them off our insurance schedule to basically self-insure, put them on our own balance sheet. There is one exception to that which I've put in the paper where I'm pulling out of the 65 to 69 and suggesting we continue to ensure that. I sent the report and the list around to all elected members and the independents, I think, last week, just so you had a chance to have a look at it prior to today. So the recommendation is based on a desire to prudently minimise insurance premiums, to prudently manage our budgets, the criticality assessment of those assets. As I said, we're only really at the medium part of the tree. So based on the assets we're taking off, many of those assets would probably be not replaced in a major event. As you focus your resources, first of all, on your real critical assets, and many years later come to some of these other assets, you'd probably be saying, we actually don't need these because they're not necessarily offering high level of service and they're not used they were not used by the community when they were here. However, should council decide to replace some of those assets, it has debt headroom to do that. So you have the capacity to replace them if you so want to. The risks transferred from insurer to council with resulting increased balance sheet exposure. I don't need to elaborate on that. Look, I think the next one is probably quite important. Removing properties from the schedule means they are not covered for individual events like a fire, as well as more widespread events like an earthquake. We focus a lot on an event that impacts a wide number of council and community assets. But of the other scale, you've got an event that impacts one asset. And so at that point, you need to make a decision. You've got the resources. Do we replace this asset? So there's a risk that if something happens to one of these assets, you actually won't have insurance cover. You will have to put it on your own balance sheet if you decide you want to replace it. And reputational risk. Should you decide at that point in time, if the asset's destroyed, not to replace it, there's always a part of the community that may not be happy with that decision. Just 2 or 3 more slides. So that's the first recommendation of taking a number of assets off a schedule. The second recommendation is to increase the deductible. Again, we spent a bit of time on the workshop in this, and it was in the paper back in May. For the MD policy, there's 2 types of events, a natural and a non-natural disaster. We're focusing on the non-natural disaster. It is explained in the report. Current deductible is $100K per event, not per asset. So if the event has an impact on a number of council assets, it's only $100K deductible, as opposed to the deductible, which you cannot change, is per asset, regardless whether it's a one-off or a wide-ranging event. So the recommendation is to increase it to $1 million based on the claims history, which is next slide, and council's ability to fund multiple deductibles. While this is a prudent approach, there is no guarantee that after making a decision and we change it, you're not going to have multiple events. No guarantee, Clayton's law. However, based on a prudent approach, we've gone through this, I won't go through it in detail, based on our claims and over a considerable period of time, the reality is that within 4 years, if we did have one event in 4 years, the saving premiums would pay for that. If we don't have an event for 5 years, we're really making some really good savings. Right, the report talks about future work streams, which is for those assets we're going to ensure getting updated insurance valuations, looking at loss modelling. It also, out of context of the report, it does talk about the work that Aon has got for pricing for the infrastructure, increase the maximum probable loss for infrastructure policy. We talked about this last December. The reasons for us not to go down this track is the same reasons that we talked about in December and is in the report, this report. So the recommendations is in the report. It was at the top of these slides. There are multiple reiterations of the preferred option. And a broad range of two broad options are continue with the status quo, just ensure assets full replacement cost regardless of what the asset, and accept increase in premiums. I don't think that's a prudent approach and is not necessarily where we should be going. That's an officer's point of view. Or we take assets off the schedule and increase the deductibles. You may decide to increase the deductible, but only to 500,000. You may decide take more assets off. I want to take all these other assets off, or I want to take less assets off. But you may decide you want to take assets off. You can have reiteration of what that looks like. So happy to take questions.
Mayor Andrew. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mike. Look, it's not really a question. I just thought it'd be, for those that are listening in, it might be useful for you to describe the difference between non-natural and natural disasters, because it is a little bit counterintuitive about what the definition is.
Yes, thank you. A natural disaster is a specific disaster that has been listed on the schedule, which does include earthquakes, volcano eruptions, and things that you would think are natural disasters. There's one or two that are not listed on this, which is where you're talking about counterintuitive. One of them is cyclones. So Cyclone Gabriel was a non-natural disaster because that is not listed on the policy as a specific disaster. And I'm not sure I've got that in the report, the snippet from the policy, but we certainly had that in the workshop, the list of things which are natural, classified as natural.
A quick follow-up on that question then is, can we make a cyclone a natural in the policy, or is that set by the insurance company, or is that set by us?
No, it's set by the insurance company. We could ask them to put it in there. We can do that. It would come at a cost.
Okay.
Councillor Michael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question, action, happy with an action. What was the insurance claim for the 2015 flood? Ballpark.
It's the one that's in there, on that slide.
That is
it's
2015?
250k, something like that. That was for assets on our MD policy. There were also claims made under our infrastructure policy, and also additional funding we got from NZTA for damage to our roading.
Cool. And going back, say, 20 years, in terms of cost to claim ratios, is it always sub $1 million? Have we not had any sort of major $10 million, $20 million claims?
When I inquired from both Aon and those at council who have been there longer than what I have, they struggled to remember significant claims pre-2015.
So I thought, yeah. And just a question on the rationale for the line. So context, most people don't complain about the whole thing, they complain about where the line is. I notice obviously there's a line with the same numbers, 60 and 60, one's out, one's in. Are we going to be able to tell the public why you're recommending one of 60 in, 160 out? Is there additional rationale we should be talking about?
Happy to talk about that. The asset we've suggested remains within the retained on the insurance schedule is the Northern Grandstand of Cook's Gardens. The expectation from the public, from a probably a large portion of the public would be that if that was destroyed, that council would rebuild it. I perhaps just on from that, I think that there is a potential for us to go further up that list.
Yep.
And remove more from the schedule, but I want to do this in a considered manner, and so that's why we've made it as it is right now. Cool. At that line.
No, that makes more sense. Thank you.
Mike Timmer.
Yeah, thanks for your paper, Mike. I think we've made certainly a very considered approach here in terms of the options and the recommendations, which I support. Number one. I just had a question in relation to the actual assets we're taking off, and my experience with doing these things is you take off 25% of the assets and you don't necessarily get a 25% reduction in the premiums, which is what we'd normally expect, because that's how insurers work. And I'm sure if you put them all back on again, it would be more than 25% to the other way. So that sort of highlights to me, well, what are we going to do to do the big marketing sell on this, to tell the insurers, hey, we've taken a really lot of risky assets off here, guys. Can you have a good look at it? So I guess that comes down to what information we've given them previously and what better information we could give them now to sort of coax them along to help us with getting our premium down and to demonstrate to them that we're actually taking off some real risky assets and they should be looking at it.
Yeah, look, good question. As I think is in the paper and as I talked about in the workshop, immediately following this committee meeting, the recommendations from this committee to council, we will be advising Aon to take them off our schedules. Appreciate that this is a recommendation through to council. If council decides that actually they want to put one or two back on, we have that ability. But Aon want to send the schedules off to London for pricing, and so they're wanting this information ASAP. Aon has for a number of years, and our insurance brokers have for a number of years has said the better information you can give the insurers, the less risk that they will price into it. And so that's a work, as I mentioned before, that we are heavily involved in, Rosemary and the team, to improve the information, and the schedules we are providing them now has considerable better information than what we did previous years, even to such things as what assets are in floodplain, the risk for assets, it has componentized assets, is a lot better information. So that should help for our premiums this year as well.
Great. Yeah, that's good to hear that, because that's really important in terms of this whole process. Just the other question I had was about the maximum probable loss and its calculation and having a look at all of that again that we looked back in December.
Mike, could I? David's just got a point that he wants to clarify in relation to your first question. So if we could just do that and then move on to your second one, thanks.
So, excuse me. Through you, Chair, just to add to what Mr. Fillmore has said there, I think one of the things that we need to do is a little bit of a personalised approach with Aon, rather than just simply packaging up the new schedules and emailing them to, or as firing it out the door. Actually, we should be spending a little bit of time with them, sitting them down, talking through all of the points that Mike has just made around the improvement of the quality of information, the process and the rigour that we've applied to get to this point, because that's going to build their confidence that actually we are de-risking what we're handing over, rather than it simply being an updated schedule and that we hope that they read into it, interpret it, what we've done. So yeah, those are probably conversations that Mike and I need to have face to face with Aon, and give them the assurance that we've done a thorough job here, and we're actively taking on risk, and as a result, our clear expectation is a material reduction in the premium that we're paying.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, because there's a little bit of work you can do here, and it can save a lot of money, and it can be just easy money. Yeah, excellent. Wonderful.
well worth the conversation. isn't
Music
it?
to my ears.
Thanks, David, and back to you, Mike.
And the second question I had was about the maximum probable loss calculation and the increase that we looked at doing back in December and we didn't. It's one of these things is you really don't want to do it because it's going to give it's going to give us probably the wrong answer. We're probably going to have a bigger maximum probable loss, we're going to have more premium, and it's fighting against what we're trying to achieve here. But at the end of the day, we still do have a risk, and it's important to understand what that risk is, and delaying having that calculation and doing that work does put us at risk. So, and I also note that it's now on the schedule of the top 10 risks, and I suspect that's probably what's driving it. So my question to you is, when is the collective going to look at that, and what's the timeline to get all that done?
I think there's 2 or 3 parts of this. As I said, this round we focus on the MD policy, and we want to do work and get that one complete. And there are some assets on the MD policy that relates to 3 water assets as well. At the workshop, it gave me a little bit of a lot of comfort actually, as we went through a practical example of, in a major event, what resources do we have available to cover an event, and even if the MPL was slightly higher than what we currently have, through reapplying some of our long-term plan budget lines, we have sufficient resources to cope with that. So we can do redo an MPL. It's something we will do in the future at some point in time. I'm also cognizant that potentially the 3 water assets, which is your infrastructure strategy, may be through the reforms going into another entity, and the entity may want to do a larger piece of work as opposed just at a council level. But certainly it's something that should be on our radar.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Peter.
Yes, thanks through the chair. My question is about the debt headroom. What interest rate assumption did you make for that? Because the impact of interest rate will have a direct implication for a ratepayer.
It is in the assumptions in the item, and we use an interest rate of 5% and a 1% movement either side of that would be a $6.70 per property per year. Now 5% is at the moment that's a long-term plan rate. That's why we use that. It's likely we can bring that slightly down. So that is quite a conservative or high rate to use to begin with.
So historically it's a high rate then?
Good question. It would probably be, if you had a range historical, probably 4.5 to 5 would probably be long term where that would sit.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kate.
Thank you. Thanks for the paper. Very comprehensive, Mike. My first question is around the airport joint venture and the port and harbour endowment assets. You've made the point here that any decision we made now doesn't apply to them. So I'd just like to understand where our discussions at with those assets and the insurance premiums.
Yeah, as council doesn't own those assets, we would need to have a discussion with the owners if we were going to change the insurance arrangements and transfer risk to their balance sheets. Having said that, I spoke with Jeff Evans last week before. I've already sent information to the board of the port to talk about what we're doing, and here's your assets. And I spoke to Jeff last week before, asking if they want help as they go through an exercise, if they want to go through an exercise themselves to assess their criticality and where their insurance should be.
Thank you. Good to know that those conversations are at least starting. and I wonder if it's something we should pick up on our statement of intent, just by the by. My next question is around the pensioner flats, and I guess it's a question that points to where criticality collides with perhaps the notion that we shouldn't be insuring. Given the amount of work that we need to do on the pensioner flats, I'm just interested to understand what it was like. I get why they're so critical, but do we think that maybe criticality is not necessarily a good proxy for whether we should insure or not?
I think that's actually a very fair comment and question. As I said, I think the next stage of decision making will be going further up that list of assets and asking exactly those questions that you've made there. Should we be taking other assets off the list because while they're ranked criticality from an asset management perspective, and don't forget the asset criticality was based on asset management, and insurance has hooked into that.
Yes.
There may be stuff for insurance purposes that while it's critical for asset management for insurance purposes, we could actually take it off the schedule. So that's probably the next stage of the journey we're going through, unless the committee wants to make recommendations today to take them off. I'm happy to take that on board.
No, I'm not sure.
I do. Rosemary is here. As I said, her team. The criticality ranking was based on asset management. Very happy if you want to ask around that framework and reasons. If you want to ask Rosemary some of that logic, there is some real sound reason around the ranking of these assets.
I'm not questioning the criticality of them at all. I'm just questioning whether, given what we're doing with the rest of our assets, whether we shouldn't be thinking about should we be insuring the pensioner flats, given that we've already acknowledged that they need to be essentially rebuilt, redeveloped and rebuilt.
Okay. Dave, do you want to respond? Sorry, David,
Yeah.
I'd like to respond. Yeah.
Look, through you, Chair, I think Councillor Cade is raising a really good point. And as Mike has said, this is our kind of second pass. We did the low-hanging fruit, as we've referred to it previously. We're now into the next tranche of assets we can, with some reasonable confidence, remove from the schedule. There's more to come. Absolutely, we should be looking at these things. The point I would probably make, and it's more, I suppose, directed towards the media and any members of the public listening in here, is some reassurance that just because we don't insure an asset doesn't mean to say we've got no intention of replacing it if it's ever lost. And I appreciate the housing for the elderly as a set of assets that will probably get pretty emotional pretty quickly because it's so close to parts of the community's heart. Our insurance is not about protecting our assets. Our insurance is about protecting our balance sheet and giving us a way of paying for the replacement. And I think that's a really important point for the public to be aware of is, removing something from the insurance schedule doesn't mean it's not important to council, and it doesn't mean to say it won't get replaced. It's just we're in a position to fund it ourselves with the strength of our balance sheet. So, removing them from the insurance schedule, absolutely an option. That will likely result in a further reduction in our insurance premiums. Doesn't mean to say that we won't replace them if they're ever lost or damaged. We'll just changes how we pay for it.
Absolutely, and I've taken that as a given. Absolutely, that just because they're coming off the schedule does not mean that they would not be replaced. In fact, to the contrary, everything's up for discussion. Thank you. No, that'll do me. Thanks.
Thanks. Councillor Michael.
Councillor Kate kind of touched on my point. I was going to make a recommendation. How does the process work? So our recommendation is to identify the criticality ranking on this. So there's no point in making an amendment. But what I wanted to say originally before Kate spoke, and now I'm second guessing myself, is I liked high being like we only insuring high criticality assets. But now I feel like we need to get into debate on what that actually means. I don't know. Like, now I'm confused myself now, Madam Chair, sorry. Because that's a very good point. But so my question then is, insurance, does our insurance mean we must replace? So if we didn't insure pensioner flats, we would want to replace them. A future council may not, though. This is where I'm going with this question, a lot of line questions. But when they're insured, do we have to replace them?
To get the insurance proceeds, there is a contract, and they will pay out the insurance proceeds once they are confident that you have replaced a similar type asset. Yeah, and this is sort of a discussion we had at the workshop. If you insure assets and the assets are destroyed, they're not going to give you a bucket of money to go and do something completely different.
It's not like an actual, okay.
But, sorry, through you, Chair, to answer your question directly, just because they're insured doesn't mean to say you must replace them. But as Mike has said, if you draw on the insurance, you can only use that money to replace them. But you still have some choice to say, actually, we won't make a claim on the insurance and we will not replace an insured asset.
Okay. And then my last question, sorry for taking so much time, Madam Chair. The review process. So I'm thinking not a decade from now. What is our process for reviewing this? Because councillors in 10 years' time won't remember we made this decision and then they get caught out by a flood. Are we going to have an iterative yearly review to remind councillors of the future?
What we've done in the past, each year, management has put up an item through to this committee to talk about the assets we have, the insurance policies we have, premiums, coverage, what they're about, the assets we're insured, and those assets we have decided not to insure. So in a normal cycle that comes through this committee each year. This year is slightly different because we are making decisions on which assets to insure. And perhaps to answer your previous question, management has recommended a list of assets. We did that 2 committee meetings ago. There was one asset in there you decided, no, I want to put it back on the schedule, and we did that. So there's assets you want as a committee, say they're insured, I actually want to take them off, you can do that. It's your recommendation through to the council, it's not management's recommendation through to council.
I just to add to that, I'm sort of great believer in going back to our terms of reference and what we're required to do as this committee. And in the terms of reference, we are to review the council's insurance arrangements, including the terms of annual insurance contracts, and to monitor risks associated with the council's insurance function, including the council's annual insurance contract, to ensure that the council has appropriate and affordable insurance coverage in place. So I think that answers it for me in terms of responsibility, but I do think there has to be a very active annual review process looking at our overall financial position, reminding us of what we decided not to insure, but so that has to be very active and very open, so that as a committee we can make good decisions about whether we would add something back on, take something else off. So it becomes a much more dynamic process, I think, once we've actually been through this.
So just adding, at the next committee meeting, I think is in December, is it? We will have the renewals, hopefully at that point, and then we can bring it back to this committee saying, here's our policies and what the costings of those policies are, just to kind of close this right now, where we're at right now.
Thank you.
Can I
Yes,
just ask a
Councillor
further
Kate.
question?
Yes.
Thank you. So it's about the renewals and the costs of the premium savings that I just want some assurance, and you have touched on this, Mike. I just want to make sure in my own mind that if we make this recommendation to council now, and council doesn't meet in time for the information that you need to head off to Aon, that the premium changes, we will have enough time to understand the premium changes by the time we get to that council meeting. For example, should we want to reinstate certain items?
You may not have. So there's the council meeting is at the end of October 20th of October. As I said, Aon want to put these schedules through to the insurers immediately following here. I will, when we send them through to them, and taking David's comments, conversation with them, will emphasise the need to get pricing back to us as soon as they can. And so we will report, we'll update council meeting with what information we have at that time.
So I'm looking for assurance that there is a process that we can follow should we want to get items reinstated, because as it turns out, it doesn't make diddly squat difference to the premium.
Absolutely. At any point during the year, be that at the beginning of the renewals, or be that halfway through the year, you can put assets onto the schedule.
Okay. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. As Mike said, absolutely there's a process. I think outside of the council meeting schedule, we can circulate the pricing information that comes back from Aon once we've received it. And then if there is a need to, we can always hold an extraordinary council meeting if you want to make some decisions to add or remove from the schedule beyond what you've already got on the table today in response to that pricing information. So yeah, the option is always there for you.
Thank you. Mike Timmer.
Yeah, just wanted to make a point because we were talking about whether items are on or off the schedule or not. I think it's important that the committee knows, and if they don't understand, and I don't know what you know or what you don't know, but when it's on a schedule, it can mean it's either on at full replacement cost, it can be put on at functional replacement cost, it can be put on at indemnity, or it can be put on at demolition costs. So don't be fooled by the fact that it's on the schedule, because it depending on what management decided which category it went into. So maybe Mike, you could just give us just a brief outline of, is everything on the schedule at full replacement cost, or what is it generally?
It is, I think it's almost exclusively at full replacement cost. We haven't, I don't believe we have assets on there for just demolition, and we haven't yet in the past done work about what a functional replacement of an asset would look like. What we mean by that is that, for example, if the two libraries, Davis and Alexander, were destroyed, would you build those assets, replace them as they are, or would you have more of a larger community centre with library facilities inside, which would be a functional replacement type asset?
Could I just make a suggestion that maybe we need to do some work around that rather sooner than later, because that could save quite a lot of money. If we've got a whole lot of stuff on there that's at full replacement cost and we don't need it, we are paying an extra premium. So it's just like taking assets off the schedule. It's going to save us money if we put them as functional replacement. And if we wanted to get cash for something, if we have a claim, then indemnity is the way to go. So I would think that would be something that we should have done. I assumed that we had. I'm pleased I raised it.
So I think that's an important point to have as an action going forward. You know, this has been a process of reviewing and taking one step at a time. I think it's another step that, you know, we could add to the review as we continue down this track. Does that make sense for you? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So just following on from Mike's point, where it's noted down here in the description of the activity, it seemed to me to be quite clear that whether it's insured for demolition only, for example, like 125 Grey Street, should we assume then that those that are just insured for demolition only are highlighted in the schedule? And Wakefield Chambers, another one.
The reason that those assets which are earthquake prone, you need to ensure that you're not insuring those for full replacement cost. And we have in the past made that mistake, because if an asset's earthquake prone, they won't pay out full replacement cost for that, only what it's worth, like for like. So if an asset insured for demolition, it would be itemised on the insurance schedule that we would have.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you for those questions. Any other questions before I put the recommendation? Michael?
I'm happy to be told no, but I would like a recommendation to be moved around, removes from its material damage policy those assets not identified as high criticality ranking for the material damage policy schedule. Your choice, Chair, if you want that one or just high.
We have got a medium on there that,
There's quite a few mediums, yep.
yeah,
My recommendation is we
Oh,
don't
I
have
see.
them on there and we go straight to the high only. And what officers put on high, based on objective criticality, will be the only ones we go to A on with.
so what you're proposing is a different recommendation and a different decision to recommendation for us to make to council, that we would only be removing those below the high level, the whole lot. And so we would need to have a discussion about that here, about how the committee
So
feels
I can
about
either foreshadow my one after yours, or we can start with that and see if it fails and go to that one afterwards. I'm happy either way.
that. I think we should do it first, since you've raised it, and open that up for discussion. Can we hear from, I'd like to sort of hear from each of the members really, because I think it's quite a big change to what officers are recommending. So could we go round,
Is
Councillor
there a
Peter?
seconder for his motion?
Yeah, true.
we haven't had a seconder for the first one yet. I'm not sure process. So Bridget suggested we put your motion, and if we have a seconder for that, we can have a discussion about that. If that doesn't go forward, we go back to the original motion. Yep.
Sorry, could I just clarify, is this an amendment or a separate motion?
It's,
No motion's been raised so far. Sorry, Chair. Oh, you answer, Chair. Your Chair. Sorry.
right. I think we should put the original motion and see if we've got a seconder for that and have a discussion. No, Kate?
I think you're on the right track. I think you've already decided that you would put Michael's
Yes, and get a
recommendation up
seconder, yeah.
first. If you don't get a seconder,
Yep.
then the motion will
Fails.
fail.
Sure, yep,
And then,
Thank you.
yeah.
yep, that's cool.
So
Okay.
Josh's question, is it an amendment or is it another one, is just a bit annoying.
Thanks for that, Josh.
Madam Chair, do you mind if I just have one sentence of why I'm choosing this motion? There's no motion raised yet. Clearly he's going higher anyway, so let's just do it now. Look at him, Mike's like, I'm taking the whole lot off.
Going high and not medium.
See? He's doing it anyway.
You want to self-insure these assets, so for example,
Josh, do you need an answer to your question?
Oh, I'm very happy, thank you. Yeah, thanks.
You don't need an answer to it.
Top notch. Yeah.
Okay, well, what we will do is, Councillor Michael, you can do your one sentence for why you want to propose that other recommendation, and we then see whether there's a seconder for that.
Yep, that's fine. So, objectivity and no emotional reasoning behind it. I don't want the public or anyone else to think that we are chopping and changing the routine. If you're high, you get insured. If you're not high, you don't. It's just a simple measure of criticality for insurance.
And so the motion that you are proposing,
Is removes from its material damage policy that those assets not identified as high criticality ranking for the material damage policy schedule.
right. Is there a seconder for that policy, for that recommendation?
Is there a seconder first?
Recommend to remove from material
Maybe we need
damages
to get
policy.
that
those
reading right.
instances.
See if there is a seconder. Well, Kate can hear everything that we're
Never get this sort of drama in
So, Mike, that's your recommendation?
We'll take that last one, it's just a duplication.
Yep, that's fine.
Yep. Can I have is there a seconder for that motion?
You fuckers.
No.
No, we'll get on you for it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's going to end up there anyway, so I don't mind.
Thank you. So there's no seconder for that motion. So we'll go back to the original motion. So the committee recommends to council, it's been really clear that it's this committee recommending to council that we remove from the material damages policy the assets identified on the attached schedule with the rankings for that policy schedule. So we take the A first, or I put both of them up, increase the deductible for non-natural disaster events covered by its material damages policy to 1 million for all council-owned assets. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Kate to move, Peter to second. Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Andrew, did you?
Yes, I see I've got my light on. Yeah, so all I want to say is I think this is a really prudent approach by our council. Rather than throw a blanket over insurance and just that we've taken more time and been focused on how we manage our finances, in this case insurance, and I would like to think that we've been putting the blowtorch on right across our financial and risk components of council to be responsible, to be efficient, and to do the right thing by our ratepayers. And I think this is a really good example of a prudent, responsible approach by council officers and governors. So well done.
Thank you. Councillor Michael.
I'd just like to thank officers for this report and the ongoing discussion we've had. This is a great response to as the Mayor has pointed out numerous times, that insurance is one of our key drivers of rate rises, and they've come up with a really good, solid response based on math, and I love math. I look forward to seeing where it goes, but I won't be supporting it. I support the philosophy. I can't support this motion because the line that's been drawn doesn't make mathematical sense. We have criticality of Wanganui East Shops toilets, Wembley Park, which is also in Wanganui East, toilets, and their criticality score of 68. They're not going to be insured, but Cook's Garden Grandstand, which is 60, will be insured. So that leads to questions on why, and we're not using a rigid method, hence my recommendation beforehand would have solidified that. But that's fine, it's going to pass anyway. But I won't be supporting it purely because I think we need a more rigid structure of what's in, what's out, and allowing officers to make fundamental decisions based on the criticality score. Thank you.
Can I just make a comment to that? We could say that it's the criticality score. Oh no, I beg your pardon. That's fine. Thank you. I'm just rechecking the scores. Councillor Kate.
Thank you. Thank you for the paper and the thinking that's gone into this, because this has been a bit of a slow boil. I think the conversation that we've had before has added some value in terms of issues that have been raised about other places that we might look to improve our insurance strategy. I think the next iteration in our discussion as we move on from criticality, I haven't quite got the word for it, but it's going to think more about perception in the community, maybe, about assets that are a must replace rather than maybe should replace it after an event. So I haven't got quite the right word for that, but it's been a really good conversation, and I think we're on the right path to achieve all of those things like efficiency, effectiveness, but mostly bring the rates down.
Thank you. Councillor Peter.
Yeah, I also appreciate the steady approach that we have. I look forward to the next steps because this is not the first cut. So, yeah, congratulations, Mike, and your staff. It's a great start. Thank you.
Okay, so all those in favour of the motion? Anyone against? Thank you, Mike. That's carried. Thanks for the input, though. I think it has been a very good discussion and, a really significant paper for us. So it will now go forward to the full council. Okay. Right. We're up to the strategic risk top 10 report. And I just note that our risk manager, Debbie, is unwell today and not able to be here. So I'm just going to pass over to Mike for a minute and then we'll talk about the strategic top 10 risks.
Yeah, just as Chair said, unfortunately Debbie can't be here today, so I'll be very brief. This is the top 10 strategic risks there. They're listed there for you along with the movements and that's some information on it. Happy to take questions on it.
Cool. Thank you.
Very brief.
Very brief. It's obviously there's been quite a bit of work go on the strategic risks from the leadership team, so we can see some movement in the risks, those that are new, and this has been through sort of like a strategic planning process with the team. So I think, and there's also the opportunity for us to ask some questions of the particular risk owners as we work through this. But Peter, your question.
Just a quick question. What happened to risk number 2? Is it got moved down, but didn't...
Previous ranking.
Yeah, previous ranking of 2.
It's down. It's actually down and out. It's out of the top 10.
Yeah. So what was it and where did it go?
Magic.
We'll have a look for that. It'll be on the.
Have a look at what that risk was.
Yeah, that's cool. Mike Timmer.
Yeah, thanks for the report, Debbie, in absence. Just a question, I see we've got a new one in the top 10 being the health and safety, there's one about health and safety here. My feeling of reading all the reports that come through on health and safety is we seem to be really on top of it, and I'm not sure why it has just popped in here. There's not enough information in here for me to say, oh, why has it gone in there? So I'm just interested to know why.
I think your comment is probably fair across some of these risks. As we look at them going forward, we'll find that some of these, exactly what you said, the work that's been done on them, they're likely to move out of the top 10 or even perhaps even to operational. We've got one there, for example, I think on insurance, with the work we're doing on that and with the asset management work, then it's potentially will move out of the top 10 risks. And
I thought David would have a comment about that. Thanks.
Yeah. Through you, Chair. As the Chair had explained, we've had a review of the Strategic Risk Register as an executive team. We spent a day away off-site going through that, as well as a few other matters. The health and safety risk is one that I think we need to acknowledge. Whilst we may have good controls in place across the board, the potential consequences of a failure in that space or an incident occurring are probably going to remain high or very high no matter what we do, just because of the nature of a lot of our high hazardous activities. We routinely have staff and contractors working around risks that could very easily result in serious harm or fatalities, either from falling from height, entering confined spaces, dealing with mechanical equipment that can cause crushing injuries. We routinely handle hazardous chemicals at the treatment plants and our swimming pools. So I think the fact that the health and safety risk remains in our top 10 is a reflection of the high hazard work that we do on a routine basis. Despite it being generally well controlled, there are still plenty of opportunities for us to improve those control regimes. And part of the work that we're now looking at is we've identified our critical risks, those being the risks and hazards that could cause fatality or serious harm, and we're putting detailed bow tie analysis risk assessments in place for each of those, and looking at introducing a set of standardized controls across the whole organization so that confined space entry or, say, working from height is managed in exactly the same way, whether it's undertaken in our parks or roading estate or at our wastewater treatment plant, for example. And that way we can make sure critical controls that are going to keep people alive are always in place, and we have a consistent approach to them. So we've still got some maturing to do in this space, despite the good progress we've made in the last 2 years. Does that answer your question? I feel like I waffled then.
Yeah, it does. I was just, while you were talking, I was just trying to find actually where we are in terms of risk appetite or target risk in relation to it, and we must be out of target for it to be up in the top 10. I just can't find it. So it's number 6. So technically it should be...
risk is low. The residual risk currently is medium.
Yeah, okay. So
and the
it's
inherent
above it.
risk
okay,
is high.
that's consistent.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Okay, good. Good. Thank you, David. I understand it's potentially problematic, but we have got it under control. But you see it as still an area of concern, which is rightly as you should.
Yeah, and I think the part of the challenge is our exposure to the risk is so great because of the volume of activity that we do in those high hazard environments, which is again why it's still sitting at a medium level risk and is not quite down into our appetite yet.
At some point in the future, obviously, it's going to pop out, because then you're going to be pretty sure that you've got it totally under control. Well, you're never going to get it, but you're going to be better than you are now.
Yeah. When I have confidence that we have consistency of controls applied across all of our critical risks, and that consistency permeates the entire organisation, and we have a body of evidence behind us that shows when we check that the controls are in place and that they're effective, that we're getting an affirmative to those questions, then I think we'll see the risk downgraded from medium to low. But we're not at that point where I've got the assurance that we're consistent enough and our controls are effective enough for me to take my eye off this ball.
Thank you. Councillor Kate.
Thank you. That was a really good conversation about one of our most, critical risks, I guess, really, looking after our labour force. Could you, in terms of organisational change, could you put a timeline on when you think we're going to get there?
Short answer is no. The aspiration is as quick as reasonably practicable. I know, so again, we had our off-site strategic day as an executive team. We started to go through individual critical risks and identify those preventative and damage limitation controls that are part of the bow tie analysis process. That was the first of what is probably going to be several sessions that we worked through with Olivia, our health and safety manager, with the view that by the end of the first quarter of next calendar year, we've got a complete suite of risk assessments for each of the critical risks. There's going to be some more work that arises based on what controls we identify, and I can't really put a timeline on those at the moment. But to give you an example, we know that for confined space entry, we have processes and procedures that say that we operate a permit to work system, but our compliance with that is low at the moment. So we need to put our staff through training, we need to revise our processes and procedures, put some new documentation in place, and that in of itself is going to be a mini change program for the teams that do that type of work. Putting a time frame around that, plus all of the other things that we haven't yet discovered the unknown unknowns around, is a little bit tricky. But certainly by the end of this financial year, I'd like to be in a position to say we've done the risk assessments. We now know where our shortcomings are. We've got plans in place, and those plans are time bound as well.
Thank you. Would you say that you have quite a granular heat process applied to those sorts of things?
Sorry, say again?
Like a granular, like you prioritise higher risk areas than others, and it has a sped up process.
Misplacing our effort by chasing after paper cuts when we're running the risk of people coming to much more serious harm in other parts of the organisation.
Good. Thank you.
Mayor Andrew.
So thank you. So my question actually related to ranking number 6 as well, around serious injury, and I think the Chief Executive has answered that, but it was my query is, and just to affirm that I have answered it, is does the council believe that there is, through our normal day-to-day activity, a greater risk of serious injury, occupational disease, adverse mental health and well-being because of our activity, or is it because you feel that this is a risk that should have been on the top 10 beforehand?
Through your worship, through you, Chair, sorry. To the worship, through the Chair. Look, I think the likelihood is this risk should have always been in the top 10. Okay. So getting it back in there is just a reflection of us tidying up our latest review of the risk register. What I would say, though, is comparing where we are now to where we were 2 years ago, we've been through the Chasens review, which was a thorough review of the whole organisation and all of our activities. We've pretty much completed almost all of the actions and the recommendations arising from that. The employment of Olivia, who is a bit of a star performer when it comes to our health and safety manager's position, she's really driven material improvement. So our risk level today, I think, is materially lower than it was 2 years ago. But as I've kind of acknowledged, still some room for improvement and a bit more work to go before we can say we're sitting comfortably and we're confident in our health and safety regime.
Okay, great. And a supplementary question to that, probably I assume it's related, that there is only one no change on the top 10. So there's been quite a bit of churn, quite a few new ones, five new ones. Is that also reflective of the deeper analysis that's been done on our top 10 risks?
Through you, Chair, in part, probably yes, but at the same time I would anticipate that churn in our top 10 is something that should be the norm. If we're proactively managing our top 10, we should see things brought under control, drop off the top 10 risk register and be replaced with new emerging risks or things that have been under control that have for some reason become out of control. So for me it would be a red flag if we saw routine stability in our top 10, because that means we're not paying attention, we're not doing our job, and things aren't moving and changing because we're not applying management effort to move things.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, David. On that number 6, the health and safety one, there's a planned additional solutions. There's 5 actions there. I'm just wondering whether it would be feasible, and your explanation today, I absolutely agree with around the history and where we've taken the Chairs NZ recommendations and what we've done in that space. I'm just wondering whether it would be useful to come back to the committee with the sort of year-long strategy going forward, which would include these actions, because there's quite a few there that you've obviously got underway and you've elaborated further today. So rather than just the dashboards, maybe next time, here are the things that we're actually planning to do more strategically over the next year to bring this even further under control. Would that be an action we could look for?
Through you, Chair, yes, we've kind of to date been doing that whilst we had the Chazan's recommendations live. But you'll know from the previous meeting we've kind of reported that they're either complete or have now moved into a business as usual ongoing state.
Yep.
So bringing the next wave of actions through and reporting on those seems like the obvious next iteration of that. So more than happy to.
Now, we've got Lance and Catherine here, if there are any questions of those, their particular risks. I was looking, I see the PMO function, the project management implementation has come on to the strategic risk register. Can you just elaborate on that a bit more about what you're particularly, I know we've got it in front of us in terms of the written template, but Lance, just the main issues for you about the strategic risk in here, because we're delighted to see it moving ahead. We're worried to see if there's lots and lots of risk with it. When you can...
Yeah, when I can get one going.
Yep. Yes, David would just like to make a general comment before you answer that.
So, through you, Madam Chair, I'll let Lance answer that particular question, but it may be worth me just providing a little bit of context for the discussions that we had as an executive team when we had that planning session. So part of the reason for the quite a bit of churn in the top 10 at the moment is we had a discussion around the current top 10 as it was when we met, and actually challenged ourselves, are these the risks that are currently keeping us awake at night, and are they reflective of where we're putting our management effort at the moment? And by and large, the answer to that was no. They were in the top 10 because of their scoring on paper, but actually when we looked at them, we had controls in place. We were comfortable that the risks had been managed to within our appetite, and that our management focus had moved on and we were already looking at something else. So what is the new things that we're looking at? What is the new stuff that's keeping us awake at night? Making sure we up our project management capability, for example, is a key focus. It's one of our strategic priorities from our organisational strategy. Why did we make it a priority? Because there's risk associated with project delivery and we think we can do better. Hence why you're seeing quite a bit of churn, because what you've got on the table now matches what's keeping us awake at night and where management's putting its effort, because we see risk, we see opportunity. But I'll let Lance talk in more detail on that one.
No, that covers it.
And what are you doing about it? Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think at a high level it comes into that umbrella of change management. So creating kicking off the PMO comes at a time where we've just gone through an LTP process that has been a different way of doing it for this council, which involved a clear link to how the PMO was going to work, and that would be through the point of entry business case process. That's now shifted over into the PMO space. So creating that more strategic oversight of all those projects throughout the LTP cycle involves change on top of change, probably on top of change. And so any time I think in an organisation, probably of any size really, where you're layering up change, there's risk that there's the resistance to change, all those sort of factors, processes that are new, processes that don't exist yet, they need to all be worked through, and so I guess the what that brings about is what we've now putting in place. So we have a PMO manager in place as recently as within the last sort of month. The framework for the PMO that Trish, our manager, has been working on has now been endorsed by ELT and has now been rolled out across the organisation, just at that very early introductory stage. And the actual change management bit of how Trish leads that, with our support across the organisation is now underway, and across the range of activities, face-to-face with staff, creation of a whole series of tools and resources on a user-friendly one website page with multiple links to sort of help get this up and running as such. So I did make a couple of notes, which surprises me as much as it probably surprises you. So I mean, with the LTP again, just touching back onto that, the year one projects are the focus for the PMO, and so we're seeing this first year, which we're in now, as it's not a trial, it's the first iteration, if you like. This is where we're going to do a bit of learning, which will flow onto the year 2, 3, and so on. Not to say we're not already thinking about year 2, 3, 4 sort of bigger projects, but we start the learning now at the same time we start sort of implementing the process, if you like. So I probably simplified it myself, if I'm fair, where I thought this would get to. But when you break it down and you start looking at all the cogs in the wheel that need to be in place to turn, there's actually quite a lot to it. And so, we think it's a genuine, needs to be on the list, and it needs to have us over the top of all these action points. So happy to say that the response across the organisation has been really positive.
I was just going to ask that actually. The team across the organisation seeing it as a value-added process or more work?
I think there's probably a bit of both, but generally my feel from it is that it's value add, and it's been something that the organisation, particularly those that work, if I think about my own area, the Three Waters guys, regularly working in that project space, some big, some small. They've seen it as a gap, and they're happy that it's here, and they've really, Trish is based in this building, but they've offered her a seat over there as many days a week as she likes to sort of embed herself in those processes. And so there's probably an acceptance there'll be an element of additional work while we embed it, while it becomes the new way of working, because we're learning new things. But we're supporting that with some training opportunities as well, some professional development, so that we're all sort of not only consistent with how we apply the framework, but with how we manage projects as well. So,
thank you. Mike Timmer.
So, and just to I didn't hear exactly, but you've obviously started reporting to ELT on it, and you've got to that stage yet, or is it just you've just implemented and people are doing the projects and they're filling out the templates correctly, blah blah blah? But have you got to that next stage where you're doing the reporting and getting some useful feedback?
Not yet, no. We're not quite at that stage yet. So we're taking a careful, considered approach and not trying to do too much too soon. So, because again, this is on top of other government reforms and everything else. So, but yeah, that's certainly. I guess that's one of the amongst the risks of change. With the LTP and cutting our cloth in terms of budget. We had to change our initial sort of wish list for how the PMO would work in terms of software and reporting software. So we have managed to source something at a reduced rate, but with that as a reduced level, I guess. So there's adding that into the mix in terms of how we report in due course has been a process we've had to work through as well. So, sorry, now I feel like I'm.
So when do you think you might do that? When do you think you'll be doing your first lot of reporting to ELT?
If not before the end of the year, it'll be very early in the new year. Yep.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Any other questions about the strategic risks? It's good to see it change, and I there are 2 or 3 on there that I think will remain on there for quite some time, but it's good to see the dynamic way that the leadership team are actually looking at the risks, and I think it gives us an opportunity in this committee to sort of dig a bit deeper in our sort of deep dives as well, and think about where we want to know more. Catherine, we didn't really have any questions of you at this stage, so but we see your, people and transformation risk in the top 10 as well, so we understand that. And there's a, long list of current mitigations, things that you're working on, so we'll look forward to, further updates in that space too. Thank you. Okay. Oh, Kate. Oh, you'll move. Thank you. Seconder? Thank you. Peter, thank you. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you very much on that. And well done, Mike Fermor, for leading that particular paper.
Exhausted of all the talking I did.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break, 10 minutes, so we'll be back at 20 to 3. Thank you. item 5.3, which is the Strategic and Emerging Risk Report for October 2024. Thank you to Debbie for the report, and it's great to see the emerging risks coming forward in this sort of format as well. So, Mike, is there anything you'd like to add in introducing this report?
Yeah, so this is every 6 months, as the item says, the review is done of the Strategic Risk Register, and in this item you've got a fairly detailed record of the changes that have been made. And as the Chair has mentioned, there's also the Emerging Risk Register, which is some quite interesting stuff on that. That's in your other attachments, as well as the pestle analysis as we look forward about what is on the horizon that we need to be conscious of.
Cool, thank you. All right, any comments or questions on the Strategic and Emerging Risk Report, or in fact on the pestle analysis? I know before we've had points made about how this committee might contribute to ongoing sort of risk view, and I think by actually bringing the pestle analysis forward like that, it does give us an opportunity to contribute to that going forward. So any questions on the risk report? Yes, Councillor Peter.
Madam Chair, is the questions only or comments as
Comments
well?
as well, yeah.
Okay. Can I have a comment then?
Yes, you can comment.
On the pestle arrangement, how can we have input into that as if I'm sitting at home watching the news and I think, oh, there's a real risk for our community. I would like the pestle to consider a broader view, say, what's happening internationally, nationally, locally, and then internally. I think they all have relevance. Say internationally, in hindsight, should we have taken a note of the risk of COVID and how that might impact? It started over in China, but it had devastating effect here in New Zealand. Could we have identified that earlier and then looked at it through the risk lens to locally?
If I can answer that, I think that's why we've got the emerging risk register now. Like we've got the avian flu, we've got a number of things that are happening where the team at the council are saying to us, we have got this on our radar. We are looking at it. It's not in the top 10 risk report at the moment or anything, but we are doing things to mitigate, to be aware of how that's actually shaping up. I think there are local, national and international elements on the pestle, well, from my perspective, and that's what the leadership team have been sort of focused on when they're looking across at all their risks. And I guess where I thought, because to have it for it to be a really dynamic and immediate type of process for each of us to be identifying the risks, that could become quite resource intensive for our risk manager to try to manage. But by putting this up, and if you do feel when you get this that there are things missing, then if you would like to put those forward, then that can be considered when they review again.
But things happen and your reaction needs to be fast. So it's that delay that is the risk, that you don't address something that's just emerged.
But that's what we would expect management to be doing. And so, David, I might just ask you about how if there were something that came up quite quickly, how would that be managed within the organisation? I think we've got the emerging risk register, which is really good. That's a big step forward. and the conversations that ELT are having, but I'm interested in whether there's anything further you can add to help Peter with that.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. The risk management framework has escalation protocols in there, so if an emerging risk is detected, we certainly don't sit around and wait for the next formal risk register review. There are requirements on our staff to escalate issues to their managers, and depending on the nature and the severity of the matter, it could come all the way up to myself if it was a big enough issue. But effectively, the risk framework directs us to take prompt and immediate action to manage risks that do emerge like that. And there are reporting requirements that would, for more serious risks, mean that we would be reporting back to council, both informally, letting the governance team know straight away via email or phone calls if it was of serious enough nature, retrospective reporting after the fact. But yeah, prompt, immediate action to deal with the issue there and then on the ground if it was warranted. Does that make sense and answer your question?
Yeah. Yes and no. The no part is that how do I get, I see a risk, say Israel starts bombing Iran, okay? It suddenly closes the Suez Canal. We have an urgent stuff that needs to arrive here early that directly impacts on us. How do I see that, or how do I get you to look at that quickly so you can put some mitigating factors into it?
Yeah. So through you, Madam Chair, in that scenario, you identify a risk and you think I need to know about it. You pick up your phone and you give me a phone call and we have a conversation around it. With a bit of luck, I'll have identified the same risk and we'll tell you, yep, we're onto it. But if we're not, that's when we have the conversation around, do we need to trigger some kind of response to this? But yeah, as your chief executive, those lines of communication are open to you 24/7. So you come and talk to me.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Andrew?
Yeah, look, I'm seem to be on the drumbeat of collaboration. So my question is around the strategic and emerging risks. If we looked across all of the 70 odd councils across the country, they would hopefully be doing the same kind of thing. So have we sort of sought to check on some of what they've got, some of the other councils, what they're doing in regard to emerging and strategic risks?
I presume we do some of that through the risk management network with our risk manager, David?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. One of the strengths of local government is the collaboration and knowledge sharing that goes across the whole sector. Just like the elected members, you have LGNZ. The management arm has Taituara. So through that, there's regular and ongoing conversations around what are the hot topics affecting the sector. We share information around what's going on, what people are doing to manage them. And then we also have a number of listservs available where we can actually post questions to all of the CEs across the whole country, where if we've got emerging issues, we can ask for assistance, guidance, support, check in what others are doing. So regular and routine communication in that space. And it's one of the values of being members of that network.
Thank you. So any other questions or comments? I'll put the motion that we receive the report, Strategic and Emerging Risk Report, October 2024. I'm happy to move. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Kate. Any comments? All those in favour? Anyone against? Carried, thank you. All right, Catherine, I think you're going to present the Health and Safety and Wellbeing dashboard, information dashboard, given that Olivia is not here today. Thank you, welcome.
Thank you. So I take it that you've read the report and dashboard and happy to take any questions on Olivia's behalf.
Thank you, and we've had quite a good explanation from David when we were talking about the strategic risks too. So are there any questions or comments on the report? Oh, Mayor Andrew.
Yeah, look, assuming I've read this right before, you know, there's a bit on around the recordable incidence frequency rates, and in July, the lost time injuries, LTIs, have been historically at 0, and suddenly we get to 24.
Yeah, so I'm speaking with Olivia, and our understanding is that they're actually trending down, but when you have 2 in a month, it shoots up the how that looks on a chart. So
Okay.
it's not an extreme thing. It's a couple of incidents that we had within that month that have been addressed and dealt with.
Okay. That's fine.
Yes, thanks, David.
Through you, Madam Chair, just to add to what Catherine said there, it's one of the symptoms of having such a low baseline where we typically don't have very many lost time incidents. Then when you do get one, it creates a bit of a spike in your frequency rate.
It would be good to sort of note that, wouldn't it? Because it does look alarming, you know, the way it's recorded. So, yeah, I don't know if there's anything we could put as a note, footnote or something on there. Any other questions, comments? No? Thank you, Mayor. And Kate seconded. All those in favour? Anyone against? It's carried, thank you. Okay, we're on to the committee self-evaluation survey. I worked with Debbie on this. It's something that we program every couple of years, just to do a stock take amongst the committee members to see how we are self-evaluating our own performance against some key risk areas. Overall, there were some real strengths where committee members strongly agreed to the statements, and that was really pleasing to see. We've also analysed the areas where the statements were, less than that. And one section that came out was the sort of internal audit section. And I think you'll all understand that we made some changes to internal audit over the last 12 months, and we've seen quite a different level of activity, or a lower level of activity in the internal audit space. We've had conversations about that over previous meetings. And so, that's an ongoing piece of work to continue to improve in that internal audit space. We will identify whether there are other actions that need to be taken and come back to you on that if there are some other actions to be taken. But we do see this as sort of like a stock take, just to get a feeling of, how committee members are feeling and whether in fact we're carrying out the responsibilities. Debbie's also provided an explanation in some of the areas from her perspective as risk manager, particularly where some of the ratings were a bit lower, as to what we have had in place or how we might be managing that particular area. As I say, we will go back and review and just make sure there's no other actions that we can put in place to continue to improve the performance of the committee in an ongoing sort of continuous improvement cycle. So thanks for those of you who completed the survey, useful information for us, and we'll continue to focus on whether there are other actions for us to take. I'll open it for any comments or questions. No? Thank you, Kate. And can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Josh. All those in favour? Anyone against? It's carried, thank you. Statutory legal compliance exception report. Is this you, Mike?
Yeah.
Is this another hat?
In place of Debbie, this is a relatively new report, a standalone report we have introduced to the committee. It's a report by exception of statutory non-compliance and what action is being undertaken for that. So hopefully it's self-explanatory. Happy to take questions.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Peter?
I seem to be the only one that's doing something. I press my button really fast. The just a suggestion, Mike, and that is on your finance and legal ones, you've got 100%, 51 in total complaints or that you've done, achieved, but you haven't got the number on any of the others, and it'd be really handy to see how many, because you've hit 98% on some, but if there was only one applicant and you were 5 minutes late, 98% seems really cool. But if you had 100 entries or complaints, then 98% means to me that you're doing really, really well. So if you could just put a number on how many there were.
Okay, thanks. We'll take that on board.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Oh, Mike Timmer.
Yeah, sorry. This report's only as good as the underlying statutory e-compliance form that you have. When was that statutory e-compliance form last reviewed for completeness? Are you able to answer that? Sorry, I know Debbie's not here, so you might not know.
Look, it would have been recent, but I can't give you exact time.
Okay.
We can get back to you with that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. Because it is, as I said, it's only as good as how old that is. So, because things are changing all the time.
We'll note that as an action. We'll come back on that. That's cool. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Oh, sorry.
Through you, Madam Chair, and apologies may have been covered in the introduction to this, but I do just want to, I suppose, draw attention to particularly the building and the resource consent compliance side of things. There's quite a few green arrows in the report showing upward trends, which is positive, because whilst we're not quite at the 100% statutory time target yet, it's been an issue for the organisation for a few years now, and it's great that we're getting quite close. The amber blip for the Resource Management Act is a symptom of our new development contributions policy, where we had a flood of applications as everyone tried to beat the new payment regime and save themselves some money, which has just overwhelmed the system a little bit. We're optimistic that will return to some upward trending green arrows pretty quickly once we get over that hump in workload that's hit us. But yeah, overall, pleased to see that upward trend.
Yes, thank you for that, and just thanks for the work in those areas where we can see that there has been, over the period of time, there's been quite significant improvements. So thank you for that. Okay. Any other comments, questions? No. Kate will move. I'll second. All those in favour? Anyone against? Thank you. We've got the audit management report this was the second audit management report, the final one for the long-term plan 2024. Welcome, Robin. Thank you for the report and your paper. You can take it that we've read it, but if there's anything you'd just like to highlight, it's over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yeah, I'll just do a brief run through, just highlighting that we received the audit management report quite recently, and that was in relation to the audit that took place between 24th of June and 15th of July. As you'll notice in the management report itself, it's relatively scarce on content, and that's because one of the emphasis matters had been removed and there's been no new issues since then either. So the two emphasis matters that do remain are to draw readers' attention to the two disclosures around uncertainty over cost savings and uncertainty over external funding of the Royal Opera House. So the long-term plan was adopted on 16 July, and this means that Council is now implementing the what's set out within the plan itself. And a long-term plan review is also currently underway, and the results from that will be reported back to the Strategy and Policy Committee in November. So other than that, as mentioned, all the details are in the report itself, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And it's a report on a huge amount of work for all of you, you know, and you know, it's a pretty short report, a couple of key matters, but you know, really significant amount of work to get to this point. So well done. Yeah. Any comments or questions? Yes.
Thank you,
Councillor
Chair.
Ross.
I am an observer, but thank you
Yes.
for letting me ask the question. It's for my own personal understanding on page 71. It talked about the uncertainty over external funding of the Royal Opera House. My question is, I don't understand what it means when it says the external funding sources are currently uncertain. I got that because funding agreements are not in place. Could you explain to me what funding agreements means technically?
So for the Royal Opera House work to proceed, from my awareness, the funding. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, I
Sure.
might jump in on this one.
Yep.
So, from a process point of view, the sequence of events is we're going to complete a business case, and I think it's Shan Shelton, the architects have been engaged to do that piece of work for us. Once that piece of work is complete and we know what the actual proposal is for the detail of redeveloping the Opera House, and we can then start the fundraising process in earnest and start making applications to bodies like the lotteries and seeking donations from, say, private patrons and those kind of funding sources. So until we've actually done the fundraising, we've had pledges and commitments made and put formal agreements in place for, say, lotteries funding, if we're successful in our applications, then that funding is going to be at risk. And we've always made that commitment that the project was going to proceed on the basis that we secured the external funding. So until the funding is secured, the project is at risk. That's really what that is highlighting there, is the project's still at threat because we don't have signed agreements with people saying they're prepared to provide that community share of funding.
So, supplementary to that one, should funding not be forthcoming, I know that would come back to council, would we be then looking at the smaller option that was in the LTP?
Through you, Madam Chair, at that point, you know, all options are back on the table, really. You could choose to descope the project to fit within the funding envelope that you've got available, or you may want to reconsider that commitment to getting external funding and go back to our community and reconsult and say, actually, do we want to fund more of this through rates because we haven't been as successful as we thought we could be through funding raising. But those are tomorrow's problems, if you know what I mean, and let's not get too far ahead and too pessimistic, because I think the project still has a strong chance of getting external funding.
Thank you, David. Mike Timmer.
Yeah, hi. My issues about, it's probably more a grumble than anything else, is that we have to pay $132,000 for this audit, and I wondered what the value add on it all is. And you're probably thinking the same thing. I guess to add insult to injury, there's a cost recovery that they're trying to seek as well, and it's from Waka Kotahi, who someone didn't really get their ducks lined up or give us a correct information. I just wondered if we'd done something about that, and has everyone else in the sector got the same problem, because that's really just not on in my mind.
Through you, Madam Chair, absolutely it irks that we have to pay for these kind of audits that at times appear to be unnecessarily thorough, and you have to question the value add. I think our main strategic response to mitigating that cost has been through the review of the non-financial performance indicators that have gone into the new long-term plan and actually paring those back. We've almost halved the number of measures, so that should remove a lot of the audit effort. Fewer measures, fewer audit activity, hopefully leads to a smaller bill in the future. But beyond that, It's an issue that is routinely raised across many councils.
About Waka Kotahi and them not giving the right information and costing everyone extra money, because that's just a silly thing. And Audit New Zealand will be clipping the ticket all over the place. It's just the government taking the money off the councils. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
Look,
happy
it's again, it's an issue that gets raised. One of the biggest issues, and again, the sector is routinely raising this, is the misstep of timing between Waka Kotahi confirming its own funding arrangements. We've only just now, in recent weeks, got confirmation of what the actual funding commitment is going to be. It's been raised for a number of years, year on year, that actually they need to bring their own funding and planning regime forward so that it better aligns with the council's LTP processes, so that as co-funders of our roading network, we're both in step with each other, and when one party makes a commitment to funding, it's matched with the other, rather than having a 3 to 4 month lag.
That all makes good sense. I just wanted to get my comments out there. I know this has been an ongoing problem, but you know, if we keep talking about it and keep raising it, and hopefully one day things might actually change.
Thank you,
So-
Matt. Oh,
I would maybe just add, recently we did have the Minister for Transport in Whanganui, and the specific point around that mismatch of timing around the NZTA's funding was raised by myself and my roading management team. So it is on the Minister's radar that it is a problem. Hopefully we see some change in the not too distant future.
yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, oh look, it's probably the point's probably been a little bit lost, but it was from Mike Timmer before in regard to audit. So Whanganui District Council actually raised this as a remit at the local government conference in 2023. Nothing has happened with that since. So, and it's not just the audits; it's the increasing burden on local government from central government imposed legislation and other requirements that has both a financial cost but is also resource heavy as well. I'm not sure what the solution is, but at the moment it's a hospital pass that we're getting, and I call it unfunded mandate, hospital pass, whatever it is. But it's a problem right across local government, and it's not fair, you know. But it is what it is at the moment, and we just have to chip away at it and keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you. I'll move. Thanks, Kate. Any seconder? Thanks, Josh. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you very much, Robin. Yeah, thank you. Okay, we've got the activity assurance report from Debbie. I think we can take it as read unless there's anything you want to say, Mike. I think just a couple of points I want to make in here is that you'll see there has been a delay in the internal audit program. So this is on page 82. The internal audit of sensitive expenditure and credit card usage, and it's delayed not due to a number of factors that were outside our control. I just was talking to Debbie about that. I needed to understand why. So it wasn't outside; it was outside our control. And you'll also just note in the internal audit, we've got two others that are coming up that we have agreed to prior for this year, but that we will in the February meeting, or the beginning of March, I think it is, we will get the proposed future internal audits in the first meeting in 2025. So that will be our opportunity to, look strategically at what we want internal audit to focus on for the next 12 months. So any comments or questions about the activity assurance report? The only other point I would make is that we have had risk appetite. We had a workshop this morning on risk appetite, and we've started that work. Very productive sort of conversations this morning, but quite a lot more thinking to go on. So we'll probably schedule another workshop between now and our next meeting to basically progress that work, so that we can take something to council around the risk appetite and how that will flow to other sort of aspects of the council as well. So, yep, thanks for your contribution this morning. We'll continue to work on that. And David, thanks for bringing that forward for us. But there is still some more work that we have to do, and we'll need some more time to do that. Okay, Mike Timmer.
Yeah, just a question. It's more on process than anything. The paper talks about only providing policies where they're new and only providing updates from now on. We're sort of told that that's what's to happen. I kind of like the idea that, you know, the committee's requested, is that okay? I sort of like that approach a bit better. From my personal viewpoint, I kind of like to see the policies every time. I don't necessarily, you know, want to go over them in detail, but when I do get a policy, I will read it and I will look at it and I will think, well, does this all make sense? Does it cover anything? Because that's partly why I believe I'm here. That if there's things missing from the policy, then I think as a member that I should have the opportunity to do that. So I kind of like to see the policies as a regular basis, that they're just added to the report. I don't think there's any extra.
I think it's been raised before, and the process for the policies has been, from my understanding, that they are reviewed. They go through ELT, there's an approval process through ELT, and then we're given a summary of what the changes are, but like it has in this case, we get the full policy. So we've got the sensitive expenditure policy, which has been referenced in here in full. It has been approved, but if there was anything glaringly that we thought was missing, there is an opportunity, I guess, to come back on that. So that's a sort of process we've been working on, rather than bringing all the policies for review of this committee. If the committee feels that we should see all of the policies, we need to have that conversation. Yeah.
Because I know there was one policy and I did make a commentary on it, and I think the comment I got back from Debbie is, well, we'll put that in next time. And I know next time, you know, so next time's 2 or 3 years away and it might get missed. And so I've attempted to give some information to help, and yet I don't believe it's been added on. So that to me is a frustration, and yeah, I'm just trying to address that point.
Okay, yep, that's cool. We'll just thought David's suggestion was that we take it offline. If you have got feedback, it can come directly to David, and he will have a look. You know, he'll have a look at and make sure that the policy is updated.
Yeah, no, that's good. We're just trying to make the process really good and get the best outcome for everybody.
Yeah. I think maybe, and maybe it's sort of like an email or something like that, where it might not get captured in this environment, but you know, a follow-up email, or whether we can get it on the action list. Sometimes it can be quite detailed and we don't necessarily get it on the action list, but if you do have suggestions, as you say, it can be added value, and David's happy to take those suggestions. Thanks. Okay, I'll move that we receive the report, the activity assurance report. A seconder. Thank you, Peter. Any comments? All those in favour? Anyone against? Okay, that's carried, thank you. And then we've just got the item 5.9, the Risk and Assurance Committee Work Programme. We've tried to yeah, just focus forward. We are adding, items of significance that come out of these meetings so that we capture them as future agenda items. But any comments or questions on the work program? If anybody's got any that would be helpful. No? Oh, thanks, Mike. Yeah.
Sorry, with the internal audit work program, it would be quite good to have the topics in the forward work program rather than just a generic comment that the report will be presented. Just we know what it is. So that what I'm trying to get at here is we know we're going to do a report in a certain time and then we deliver it on a certain time, because now we've had a situation where we've had a whole big gap and there hasn't really been anything. So that's what I'm trying to achieve out of that.
So that one in December where we've got internal audit reporting, so we can say that will be the sensitive expenditure. So we'll just list that. If we could just note that, Bridget.
So, and in the future we could put them all in there, because I remember asking Debbie previously about it, and she said, "Oh, it's the same program as we had at the beginning of the year." But like if it's in here, I know it's coming up, and
and when it's coming. Okay, no, that's cool. We can do that. All right. Oh, Councillor Michael.
Just a quick one on the CCO reporting. With the changes in the structure of the committees, we obviously got blank for the moment, but have we thought about how we're going to follow along with the CCO committee?
Yeah, we had a bit of a discussion about that this morning. I think, so in the past we've had, the risks and the mitigations come to this committee. I think maybe we're still early days, but we do need to get that back coming to this committee, the sort of risks in that area. Yep. Any other comments on that?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, I think there needs to be some form of reporting coming through this committee. We maybe just need a little bit further discussion around how those risks are pitched, because you employ professional boards of directors to manage the risk of their business. Probably the risks that come through here ought to be more focused on risks affecting council as the shareholder / owner of the businesses or the investments. Slightly nuanced, slightly different focus, but happy to have a further discussion offline and lock something in.
For clarity, that's what I meant.
Yep. That's good. That would be really helpful. So we'll note that as an action too, because there has been change going on, and but it's important. The conversation we had this morning was about what are the areas of council that this committee needs more information on, and we were talking about sort of tier 1 and tier 2 projects or particular risky projects. So it's the CCO sort of area for us is one where we probably need more reporting, but we need to decide what that needs to look like.
Yeah, and not to just go on, but obviously now with W&P and eventually holdings will not be CCOs.
Yes. Yeah.
You got it.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for raising that.
Yeah, thank you. Just a bit of a carry on from that. I understand the distinction between a subsidiary company and the directors running it in a professional type manner. That said, I don't think that there's any harm in the shareholder having a look at their risk register and understanding what they're doing to mitigate their risks. I mean, for me, that's just an ongoing management to make sure they're doing their job properly.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, look, don't disagree, Councillor Kate. Just don't interpret my comments as trying to preclude that stuff. More just around making sure we've got the focus in the right place. That's all.
Yeah, a bit of a pick and mix is what I'm saying. You're right in what you say in terms about a slightly different angle and what the risks are, but I think we need to understand that they're managing risk in their own business as well, because there's reputational damage to us, for example, which I think is a way of agreeing with what you've just said.
Yeah.
We'll take that forward and fill that gap in our work program.
Thank you. Look, and I don't want to be grumpy, but can this not take forever? Not that things take forever, but this has all been churning away for quite some time now in terms of our CCO committee. So, yeah, by
Need to get
Christmas would
something,
be
yes.
great.
Okay,
Thank
that's
you.
cool. We can do that. Yep. Right. We've got that on the action list. That's fine. So, any other comments, questions? No. So we'll, can I have a mover and a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Seconded, Josh. Thanks. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's great. I will declare the meeting closed. Thank you all very much for your contribution today. Thank you.